Y'all hearing what I'm hearing, or y'all hearing different stuff? Because I keep hearing affordability, access, and equity.
Inclusion.
Inclusion, yes. And that's why we all here today together. So what does our budget look like? If our budget doesn't look like that, then something's wrong, right? So we need to pay attention. You can see the whole general fund. So we're spending $180 million on Tuesday in our budget with the city. And so the general fund is the largest part of that, about $124 million. And so these are some of the big items in the general fund in Oreo cookies. So if you want to see the whole general fund, it's over there. But I mean, I want y'all to take note that we talk about equity and inclusion. Can anybody tell what the biggest budget item is?
Police.
The police, right here, 29 Oreos. So every Oreo is $1 million. So they get 29 Oreos. I don't know if y'all can see equity and inclusion down here. My friend Keenan's shouting out equity and inclusion. And that's the part I eat first. Equity, y'all, is when you undo the Oreo, it's not even a whole Oreo, and it's not even a half of an Oreo. It's the cookie with not even the cream. Right, in this budget. That's what equity gives. It gets less than $400,000, equity and inclusion. Right? What we value, look at the money and you'll know what we value. We can say a lot of things, right? But look at the money. Look at transit. Transportation too. Right? Community and economic development gets 2.5 with the cream. Housing trust fund gets the Oreo without the cream, only a half of an Oreo. This tells us what we value here in our community. And so we wanted just to have a day where we could come out and talk real about the budget together, talk about our feelings about what this means to us, and encourage people to say, if this is not the budget for our city, then we want our city to vote no on the proposed budget. And I have this wonderful illustration over here that Vicki did, and to say yes to some of the things that are over there, right? We could say yes to fare free transit if we wanted to. We could put more money into equity and inclusion if we wanted to, right? We could put more money into raises for our lower level city staff to make sure that we're appreciating everybody. Because sometimes, y'all know, the cream rises to the top and the people at the bottom don't get a whole lot, and that's wrong. And so we want a budget that reflects the values that we say we hold dear. So that's why we're here today. We'd like to do this a little bit of a popular education style. And so teach each other what we know about this budget. So I want to start by saying, and I hope that y'all be thinking, because some of y'all have been showing up. I'm dropping the microphone. We have our press friends here today. So thank you for coming out from Mountain Stream TV. So I just want to say we have Asheville FM in the house today. A couple of Asheville FMers here. And LOS was here on this side. So, and I think I have anybody, People's Media? Got a lot of People's Media out here. Poncho, thank you. So we want to teach each other what this budget means to us and start a dialogue that we hope will spread out into the community. So we're going to ask you, we have a fact sheet here. If you need to know more today, when you leave, we want you to take that with you. And as Poncho says, we want you to be the teachers, because I don't know all the people that you know and you don't know all the people that I know. We have to spread this information around to make sure that everybody knows what's happening in our city. So today, I want this to be a place where we can share popular education style. So we're going to have a lot of people coming up and speaking and sharing what we know. So the first thing I'll say is that this is a long process. This budget starts in the fall, where city staff members start developing their budgets for each of their departments. And then it begins to go to city council at their retreat. And then you start seeing in the spring budget workshops. So one of the things that we know is we want the budget process to be more engaging with the people that the budget is for. And there's been a real lack of transparency around the budget. So I'd like to read a few quotes about the budget if I can. This was from Councilman Brian Haynes, who was asked about the city budget process by the Asheville Blade. David Forbes wished that they could have been here, but they had a medical appointment today. But they've been here in their writing. Councilman Brian Haynes says that since he took office in 2016, he's never really been satisfied with the level of transparency in the city's budget process and presentation. It's a little discouraging. Even council, Haynes said, often doesn't seem to get a full picture from senior staff. We're told one thing we're told one thing at one time and then another thing later. So that's from a council member about the budget process. And I'll just note that normally budget presentations at the council level are at least 15 minutes long. This year we saw those presentations lasting about 3 minutes. So there's not a lot of information that's getting out to the public and even sometimes the council. One of the things that several of us who've been at the budget work sessions asked for, and a council member asked that there be a public presentation of the police budget, which is asking for another increase, an increase of 15 officers. The police have had increases. This will make $5,600,000 over the last 3 years in police increases. Instead of having that come to a meeting, a public meeting, a work session about the budget, the police chief held private meetings with city council members behind closed doors. So we never got that information about what they're actually asking for in these increases. But we know that if we get 15 new officers for the downtown South Slope, we will be the second most police city in the state, having 10 more officers over even the national average. So these are things that we know about, but there's a lot of lack of transparency in our budget process. Some of y'all may know that we had a deficit in our budget. You may know that this year. There was a big hole that the city council tried to fill. So I want to highlight that, and this is what reporter David Forbes said about that in the Asheville Blade. The budget gap was self-inflicted. The budget gap was self-inflicted, caused largely by an insistence on an expensive and controversial proposal to massively ramp up policing in downtown and on raises that will disproportionately go to higher level city staff. That meant that a number of social justice initiatives, fare free transit, or considerably improved transit service, participatory budgeting, an eviction crisis fund that proved popular in last year's elections were pushed completely off the table. So these are the things that we're out here just to say we're not okay with that we as a city deserve a better budget. And so we want to invite you to talk about what you want to see in a better budget. So I don't know if anybody here would like to share some things that you know about the budget process that you've witnessed, or that you want to share or see in our budget that we haven't seen in our city budget, or we want to see more of. Allison.
I bet a lot of people don't know that any lawsuits filed against the Asheville Police Department are not in the Asheville Police Department budget. Those are put in a general fund. So when you see the 29 Oreos, you're not seeing every Oreo. Somebody's already ate it that way.
I'm sorry, we couldn't hear you on this side.
Allison, you want to say it? This side couldn't hear very well.
The Asheville Police Department budget that Amy has up here with 29 Oreos, that doesn't include lawsuits filed against the APD or any kind of wrongful actions taken. That is actually included in the general fund that's covered in the budget department. So you're not seeing every Oreo. There's little crumbs everywhere. It's hidden.
So that's very helpful. Allison Scott's a member of our Citizen Police Advisory Committee. And one of the things that we know is that the city is up against probably millions and millions of dollars in lawsuits right now due to over-policing. And so one of the things that we say is that we don't need more policing. We need to put the money into root causes of our struggles, right? Into access, affordability, and equity and inclusion. James.
The city, I believe, spent quite a few $1,000s to restore a racist symbol that needs to be actually taken down. I'm talking about the obelisk that stands behind Amy Cantrell at this time.
Talking about the Vance Monument.
Vance Monument, yeah.
Who else wants to share what you know about the budget or what you'd like to see in this budget? Go ahead. You want to come up so maybe people can hear you a little bit?
Yeah, so the city council voted to support taking away the first hour of free parking, which I actually personally set in the parking garages, and I support that move, but I would like that money to go into transit, not into the police. So Fair Fee Transit would originally cost us about $800,000, somewhere in that ballpark, and we could get that if we didn't have the increase, the expansion in police officers.
So if you didn't hear, what she was saying is that we made some changing to parking that gave more money to the parking services budget, and that was used to fill the hole in the budget process. And what Vicki was saying is we would really like to see that money used for transit. It's technically supposed to be used for parking or transit, to be able to provide fare-free transit access, which we know costs about $800,000. So we could take one of these Oreos, for example, from this stack and put it into the transportation stack or the equity stack. And that's what we're talking about, moving the money. So where would you like to see this money moved around? Because this is your money. Anybody else have some thoughts about moving the money or this budget?
I live in the middle of downtown on Biltmore Avenue, and what I see is the use of the police to move the transient people from point A to point B, and that's what they do. In terms of all the traffic violations going around downtown, I've personally almost been run over. I've lived here 9 months, probably 50 times, and I've almost been run over, my daughter and I walking, because there's tons of people speeding, jumping stop signs, and running lights. We've never seen a traffic stop downtown. If we put cameras and the plate technology and the software that shoots the plates and issues tickets, this city can make a ton of revenue off of the violations going on in traffic downtown, which is not really what I see law enforcement doing. They're standing on corners telling people to move along. While people, and I think a lot of tourists and drunk tourists, if you're going to advertise yourself as Beer City, also please come and drink, but also let's have parking so you can then drive your car and violate traffic laws. So I think that all sends a huge mixed message. And if we're going to do that, then we need to generate revenue off of the people breaking these laws. And those codes, cameras, the software is available. They do it in other cities. They issue tickets. Huge revenue generator that we can then put back into prevention, free transportation, safe sidewalks, pedestrian and bicycle areas that this city just doesn't have.
So putting money into helping pedestrians. We are one of the most pedestrian unsafe cities in North Carolina. If you didn't know about that, it's a big crisis that's happening. So folks that particularly from an equity standpoint, folks that have to walk everywhere they go or ride the bus are much more unsafe in the city. So moving money into pedestrian safety features, to cameras, to stop people from speeding and violating stop signs, into sidewalks, into transit so people can get around on the buses rather than in cars. So good suggestion. I saw your hand.
We need more affordable housing. We need to transition to renewable energy, which can actually save the city money. And we need to pay our city workers a living wage, starting at $15 an hour.
Awesome. So what I hear is move the money into better wages. So right behind you, we have that pay increase. That's one of the things that council could say yes to. Putting money into housing. So this again is how much we're spending in housing. That comes from the the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And putting money into sustainability, which right now gets half of an Oreo cookie. She was saying as a driver that she often has people walk in front of her car. So I think some of the solutions that y'all have are similar, right? If we had better crosswalks, We're already using solar to put flashing alerts on signs where there are crosswalks. But the other thing that she said at the end is driving while black, right? We have a huge racial disparity in traffic stops and searches. If you weren't aware of that, we've been working on that, and one of the big solutions is written consent. It was passed by council and has now been put back on the council agenda for a process concern because the Police Benevolence Association threatened to sue the city because we were giving them asking them to give us a tool and making sure that our constitutional rights weren't violated. So that also will be on the June 19th City Council agenda. So this is a very important thing. And all these things connect, right? So one of the things that we say is we can be creating really good policies, but we have to put budget into play too, because policies and budgets go together. So I'm really glad you made that point. That's really helpful. Who else? What are some things that you'd like to see more of in the budget that you don't think we see enough of? Jesse.
I actually want to come back to the comment that you made about how we have some resources that are currently being used to move people that do not have places to go to receive. And you suggested that we take the shift the focus to generate revenue. And I want to just come back to that point A to point B. The resources would be needed to do that if there were more resources put into a place where people can go and feel like they have a place to stay during the day or in the evening time where they feel safe and where they feel wanted and included in the city. So maybe those resources, instead of going to pedestrian education or some of the other suggestions that were made, they could actually go into providing resources for the people.
That's right. So what Jesse, I'm just going to lift up what Jesse was saying is that we need to move money into services rather than targeting people, particularly moving people around if you're experiencing homelessness. The same can be said, I think, for people of color in other places in our community are often displaced. And our friend Keenan Lake was here, who works with youth. With my daddy taught me that, and his partner with my sister taught me that. And one of the things we see is the same thing happening with youth. So it happens with different populations of people that we're using our resources to move those people around when those folks really need to be offered space, services, resources. I know Keenan's been looking for more space. We know that we don't have enough space for people to gather, particularly if you don't have a home. So all of these things could be solved in this budget. And that is, I'm pointing out the community and economic development budget, which gets 2.5 cookies, and only a small percentage of that goes to something called the Strategic Partners Fund. And that is the fund where the city partners with nonprofits to help provide services. And that budget is extremely low in comparison. And let me just add that these folks, these nonprofits, are putting those dollars on the ground in ways that really stretch them far more than what we could do as a city. But we put very, very little money into it. And we make people who are doing really good work on the ground compete for those funds in a process that feels really awful, right? Think about if you're in a room with people that you love and respect who are doing really great work, and it's different work from the really great work that you're doing, and you don't have enough capacity to do that work and enough resources to do that work, and then you have to fight over the crumbs that Allison talked about, right? How much? $200,000? Somebody help me, in the Strategic Partner Fund? Not much. Not even half a cookie, y'all, without the cream. So I want to make sure that we are paying attention, right, to the fact that we're creating the city by the ways that we're spending our money. I wonder if you could share your... Ashley's got a really great visual for us of where we could be putting this money.
So just as Amy was just talking about strategic partnerships, I think the problem solving that's needed in our community around crime and drugs and addiction, like there's problems that we have and we need, and violence, we need some strategic partnerships around problem solving. So bringing police department and communities that are most policed, having them in partnership with one another. Pay increases, as has been talked about, but you know, all of this is about growing trust and like for there to really be a focus on what are we focusing on. There's like what we actually fund, but what are the priorities behind that our city is invested in? Is growing trust and having strong relationships part of our priorities? Preventing deaths and homelessness. I mean, straight up, people are dying for very severe reasons in our community. And so what would it look like to reduce the prevalence of guns in non-criminalizing ways? How do we get guns off the streets in ways that don't criminalize people who have the guns that are turning them in? How could the police department perhaps be involved in helping to reduce the numbers of guns on the streets, again though in ways that don't criminalize people? Prevention opportunities, treatment opportunities for people that have low or no income. That's a real gap in our social services. Yes. There's not a lot of services that exist for prevention and addiction treatment. I also just think as far as like the free transit, let everyone move around this city.
Yes.
Why can only some people move around the city? Let everyone move around the city. And as a community, what does safety look like in our community? How do we define what safety looks like? Safety for many people doesn't just look like having more officers on the street. There's a lot of people who that doesn't make it feel more safe, but what is the conversation that we're having about what does safety look like? Yeah. I think you've said all of the other things.
Thank you. Awesome. That's really awesome. I love that. I'm going to come right back to that in a second. Speaking of community safety, my friend Pacho Bermejo, who's part of our core team at Beloved Asheville, wanted to share just his experience downtown in terms of feeling safe. Because sometimes we prioritize some people's safety at the expense of other people's danger. And so he wanted to share a story about policing downtown. So I'm gonna have you share that story.
So I guess when you were saying about moving the money, where we need to move the money, we need to move the money to places like this in the neighborhood, because you can see the need segregate this city. Like, you know, see black kids playing here because we are not welcome here. Like a lot of the times when I walk in downtown, like I have been here 5 years and the police have been giving me 5 tickets for a normal situation that a white person can be doing every day. Like they give me a ticket for ride a bicycle, for take pictures, for being apart before 10 o'clock in Petrias Park. Then we know they play drum circle day until 11 and nobody received tickets for this reason. So one of these times then they give me a ticket. I was walking in downtown, I was coming from a bar and I was having a lot of pain in my clothes because I like to paint, and the police stopped me and say, hey, I need to check your backpack because you put a description of somebody that is doing graffiti. So if you can see, like if you see in all this park, like how many people look like me, and they just told me in the middle of downtown, say then they're gonna look in my backpack because it's somebody doing graffiti, then look like me, because people like me always look like somebody doing something wrong. We never look like somebody doing something right. So they check my backpack and they let me go, and so only my family came from Mexico too. So because before I was thinking then this place is about tourists. So my family came from Mexico and they spent 6 hours in Asheville and they received a ticket in the first 2 hours then they was here. So it's not about tourists because, you know, it's a car full of brown people, so something is wrong in the middle of downtown. So, and they give us a ticket. So I started thinking why all this shit is going on, and I think it's because all the time that they give me a ticket is because they say, you're not welcome, why you came back? I'm gonna give you another fucking ticket. You need to understand that you're not welcome in this city. So you can see then, they are right, like you're not welcome. This is the reason for we don't see other colors in downtown.
Thank you. So we don't want community members to be afraid to be a part of the city that they live in. Did y'all hear that? The man has got a ticket for riding a bicycle, for taking pictures, for walking in downtown, and for playing music in a park. Right? Like, how wrong is that? Is that a coincidence? Have y'all ever gotten tickets for riding a bike, taking pictures, playing music, or walking downtown? Like, this is not right. This is not the kind of city that I want to live in. And this is not the kind of value system that I have around money. Because we need a lot of things in this city. I don't know if y'all have looked around, but we have a lot of needs in this city that we can really make better. And so I just want to highlight, but I want you to write to City Council. I want you to call City Council members. We have 1 week to change their minds. I think we have some people that are already leaning in the direction that we want to go. But we got to give them some backbone and courage. We got to say, hey, the people are with you. And we need to tell them, we don't want you to vote for this budget because this doesn't look like the city that we want to live in. This is not where our values are. We don't want our money to be put places that we don't value. And we have too much that we do value that we don't have enough of. So I want you to figure out what your heart list is. Where do you think they should move the money? And look at some of these things. And I want to be really clear. We've talked a lot about policing because we know we're at a crisis in America in policing. And it's hurting and killing people that we love. And it's hurting and killing people in our communities. If people are not being sentenced to death, they're being sentenced to a life where they might be incarcerated, where they can't get a job, where they can't stay with their families, where they can't afford to eat and live. So I want to say we have a crisis in that, and that's why we're here. We don't hate people who are police officers. And in fact, one of the things we said is we want pay increases for low-level staff, which includes the police, if you look on here, on this diagram right behind Matt. So I want to be really clear about that. But we want to make sure that we are putting the money in the right places. Because where we put our money creates the outcomes that we get. And right now our outcomes are not really good, y'all. We have 500 to 600 people who are homeless at any given time. Our phone rings off the hook because people are getting evicted every day or saying, I can't afford to live here, right? We have people that can't get jobs because their work won't hire them because they don't have reliable transportation because they're on the bus. And so people deem the bus not to be reliable because we don't have enough funds to put into transit to make it reliable, right? And some people can't even pay the dollar to get on the bus. So we need to put more money into transit. Did you know that there's cities all over the world, including cities in North Carolina, where the city council gives money to the people in what they call a participatory budget? We heard that mentioned at last year's council meeting budget session. It's not even come up yet. They've not moved it forward. But participatory budget, Greensboro gives about 1% to the people and says, y'all can get to spend a year deciding what you want this 1% of your budget to go to. The people get to develop the projects. They get vetted by the city staff to make sure they're doable. And then the people get to vote on where that money goes directly. That's a participatory budget. We could put some of our budget funds into that. So there's all sorts of ways that we could spend our money. And so we just want to make sure that the city council hears from us. Hears that we don't want this proposed budget. So we're asking people to call them, ring their phones off the hook, blow up their email inboxes, and say vote no to the proposed budget on June the 19th. But vote yes for the community and to move the money into places where we need it the most. Does anybody else have anything else you want to share about that?
So one of the things that I think is really important for us to do is realize there's a sense of urgency, and si se puede, yes we can. We saw the last city council meeting that when we needed written consent, all it took was getting 4 or 5 in this case votes to instruct the staff. If we wait until next Tuesday, it's going to be too late. So we need to do it now. We need to do it immediately. I spoke with Brian Haynes today. I spoke with Councilman Keith Young today. They are not hearing from as many of us as they are from people who want $2 million in additional policing. We acknowledge that more policing is not more safety for all the people.
That's right.
So the other thing that's really important, that stack of Oreos, I'm watching it grow every year. This is the new line. It will be more Oreos next time.
Yep.
So we not only don't want $2 million now, we need to prioritize the environment. We need to prioritize the people. We need to prioritize affordability. We can prioritize access.
Yeah.
But we're not doing it, and we don't have enough votes. So we really got to get on the phone and help people understand that that is not the Asheville we want to live in, and we want to set a better example across the Southeast and in this country.
That's right. Thank you. We need 4 votes of council. We have 7 council members. We need 4 votes of council in a week's time.
So I was just wondering if there are people here that have questions about the budget, about the process, or something, so that we can all be on the same page with the right information when we're talking to council about what's happened, where did this increase come from, and then we can put forth our ideas about our reasons why we think that we don't need more policing, and why police chiefs all across the country have figured out how to police their towns with fewer officers per 10,000 population, and we should also be able to tell them what we want to move money to. So I was just wondering if there are questions. There's just popular education style is like, in this circle there's a lot of knowledge. Not one person might not hold all that knowledge, but lots of us know different pieces of this budget, and so I was wondering if there's any questions around the budget.
And no question is a dumb question, because we all learned together, and we didn't know all that we know all overnight. We learned it along. Anybody have questions? Yeah.
So they approved the 15 officers last year, and they paid for half of a year of them. So the total costs of the, but they haven't implemented the downtown unit yet. The total cost of the salaries of the 15 new officers is around $960,000, $30,000, something like that. They're also proposing $400,000 for more police academy classes, because they want to go up above that level so they can come back down to get to the right amount by the end of the year. So we're saying if you lower the amount, you could still come down without having to fire police officers or anything like that. They also have some other money in that police budget for a couple of things. But the fact that it's increased $5 million over the past 3 years and 3-point-something million over the last 2 years is, and last year's when they approved those first 15 officers.
So one of the things, there's a wonderful website called governing.com, and it has a lot of good data. And one of the things that it does is that the FBI updates the numbers of police officers that communities are using. And so what we see is that number then per 10,000 in population. And so the average per capita for cities our size is about 16.1 nationally. We will be, with this increase, 10 officers per 10,000 in population above the national average. We are above cities all over North Carolina. We're way out of line with this budget in terms of that number, and that's why we say that causes us to be over-policed and causes situations like what we saw with Mr. Johnny Rush, who was working a 13-hour shift on his feet, washing dishes at the Cracker Barrel, walked home to his home in public housing because the buses weren't running, because we don't have enough money to put toward buses running that late at night for our workers. Then was stopped for jaywalking, which isn't even a crime in North Carolina, and trespassing because he was walking through a parking lot of a business that was closed. So these are the kind of things that we say, we don't need our police doing that work, we need them doing different kind of work. And that is often what happens when we're over-policed. And so, as Vicki said, we figured this out all over the country, and so we're hoping we can look at that here. And the other thing is that there's a lot of chaos right now in the department, and we think that that's not a great time to bring on 15 new people. We also know that the officer that is no longer with the department, Chris Hickman, who was involved in the beating and tasing of Johnny Rush, was training another officer at the time. And so these are dangerous situations that cause more harm to our communities and raise up more officers that are not being trained well in the ways that we would like to see our police officers acting toward folks that are in our communities. I saw your hand, and I see James.
Back to the budget. The head count
So the police department is flat this year, last year. We're hiring 15 additional patrolmen.
So they're going up to 238 sworn officers in Asheville.
The budget shows flat. 296 regulars and 4 funded outside the police department.
They approved the 15 increase last year. They haven't fully implemented it.
The numbers were the same.
What?
The numbers were the same from last year.
The year,
This year's budget to this year's budget.
right, because they approved them from the current budget that we're in. So they approved them last year, so the 2017-18 budget that we're in is 15 higher than it was the year before. And yes, it is. What?
According to the budget,
I'm
doing FTEs, 296 last year, 296.
right, because they approved it for last year's budget.
So that number is a carryover from
In
last
year's budget.
Yep.
So the year before that, 2016, 2017, we were 15 lower than that. So they approved it for last year's budget. This year they're also planning to go way over that budgeted amount, so that as they deal with attrition, it comes back down to the total number of officers.
So by
Work for an increase from the previous year, not last year, but the year before. I didn't see it. Maybe
That's where it happened.
that's the explanation for you. By December, according to a document that was given to City Council by the police department, we'll be at 258 officers to account for all that attrition that is happening. So but these are good questions, and we're really glad that you're asking them. And again, I just want to lift up the urgency of this. We gotta really call and get people calling council right now. I saw James's hand, and I think Scott. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, James.
How feasible is it to have that budget where 1% goes to the people to vote? Is that reality or only reality in another city?
It's very much it could be a reality here in Asheville. Again, all these decisions are decisions of City Council. It takes 4 votes of City Council to get the majority. We definitely heard Councilman Keith Young talk about participatory budgeting last year. So we just need to really tell council, hey, we're really interested in participatory budgeting in Asheville. Would you think about setting aside some money to that in this year's budget or next year's budget? So if that's something that's very important to you, please do tell council members about that. And there is a wonderful website online. So if you Google participatory budgeting, you'll get that. And they will highlight what's happening all over the world around participatory budgeting. It came to the United States in 2009, but has been going since the 90s in other countries. Greensboro is our closest neighbor that has a participatory budget, so you can check their participatory budget out, and the things that people funded often were like recreation and sidewalks, and those are some of the things that came up today.
The general fund is the discretionary money. That's it pays for things that we can choose between, and then there's fixed pieces of the budget that are the overall budget. So the $180 million is the general fund budget.
And then we also have things like the U.S. Cellular Center has a fund, Parking Services has a fund, Stormwater has a fund. Those are all separate line items. They have their own separate piece. So the general fund is typically what we can do the most advocacy around. And those are the things typically that are really meaningful to us. That's the $180 million. Yeah, absolutely. And we're really advocating around alternatives, and there's been a lot of really great work, if you're new to this, around policy changes with the Asheville Police Department and working with the police department. So I'll name the NAACP and Code for Asheville have been working around these traffic stops that we talked about where there's great racial disparities. Many of y'all are with Beloved's Homeless Voice Community Power Group, who's been working around policing in terms of people experiencing homelessness and have been really finding some good solutions to offer to the city in that. The city is trying to move a lot of these forward, which is really great. And we want to make sure the money follows policy, that we're putting our policy, our budget funds into these kind of alternatives that really focus on making sure that our community members are getting the support that they need at the roots. Again, we are naming that as equity and inclusion, affordability, and access, because these are the kind of things that keep down criminal activity, and really beginning to move our police force on to focusing on the big things and really beginning to look at these alternative ways of handling the smaller things that we're dealing with. So looking at alternatives, as we talked about, to asking people to move along in terms of being experiencing homelessness here. Written consent, and dealing with regulatory stops are another way. So one of the low cost, no cost solutions that the NAACP has brought forward with Code for Asheville is to say, police shouldn't deal with regulatory stops, because those often are where we see racial disparity. What we mean by that is like your tail lights out, your tags out, to not stop you for that, but maybe have you, they would run your tag and send you a letter and say, hey, your license plate's out, your tail light's out, you need to have that fixed, but not pulling people over. That usually costs about $100 an hour per police officer to use them in that way.
I want to start with saying that I'm really encouraged to see my neighbors here, because I know that it takes time and energy, and not all of us could be here today. So thank you for taking that time and making that intention. I'm also really, really encouraged that when Keith and Shanika put forward the motions for written consent at the last city council meeting, I was pleasantly surprised that the mayor and Julie Mayfield voted with them and Brian. Yes. So when you call the mayor and when you call Julie, say thank you, but that we need to make sure our funding matches our policy and our values. So call, email, talk to your friends, talk to your coworkers, just let them know that this is something that we can do. It's the right thing to do, and thanks for being here.
We're going to have a rally right in front of City Hall at 3:45 and go in, but make your voices heard, because once we get in there, it's a little late. We want to call them this week and make sure. Who can commit to talking to 10 people that you know and encourage them to call or write city council? And really, folks, this is easy. Some people get intimidated. They say, I don't know enough to call. All they need to know is vote no to the proposed budget and vote yes to putting our money where our values are. That's all they need to say, because council's hearing in detail from some of us, and they're going to know what that means, okay?